Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to Gem Stories, the podcast dedicated to sharing genuinely empowered Muslim sisters' stories. I'm Sadaf.
And I am Amani, and this is episode 1. Today we will be discussing the virtue of joy as aspect of our faith.
Yeah, as Amani mentioned, in this episode, we'll be talking about joy, and especially with our favorite therapist, Manijeh Sheik. She is one of the gems of our community. And we hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you do, please be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more conversations with Manijeh. For those of you who may not know Manijeh, she has been part of this organization since the beginning. Manisha has been on our board. She's been part of our Leaders in Training program, and she helps train our young leaders in the art of self-leadership. And it's related to her work because she is a licensed mental health counselor at Sheik Empowerment Therapy, and she believes in empowering individuals with the tools they need to imagine and implement new ways of being. And our youth really need that. And we've seen that our youth kind of need these new tools, right, for understanding how to be. And just as much as our youth need it, we need it as women, just to understand what are we going through and how can we be in a different state of joy and existing and feeling and getting through all of these difficult emotions. So Manisha is somebody who has so much experience treating anxiety, depression, parent-child relational difficulties, and emotional regulation challenges. She studied she got her master's in counseling from Rollins College, and we're really excited to have Manijeh here with us today.
Thank you, Sadaf. Thank you, Mani.
Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here. I'm really excited about all the amazing work that MW has done over the years. I think the organization continues to do amazing things, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. And I'm also really excited to be about a part of this conversation that we're about to have today, because it's important that we talk about these things.
These are the things we all need these days because, as you know, Ramadan is here. So we wish Ramadan Mubarak for everyone, and Eid will be around the corner. And because of what is happening in Gaza, people are really disturbed and traumatized. So, how can we discuss joy or even think of it without discussing pain first and how we can cope with pain? So, if you give us an idea about how we can address or should address the pain.
Yes, Amani, I think you bring up a really important point, which is that we can't begin a conversation about joy without really talking about pain. And there's a lot of, in a way, we're having survivor's guilt. Even though we may not be in Gaza or in Palestine, we're witnessing everything, through our phones, and we're experiencing vicarious trauma. Witnessing the pain of someone who's gone through trauma for almost as closely as we are, where we have these images sort of planted into our minds, and so we're relating to their experiences on a very deep level, and there's this experience of trauma. And I'll be really honest, I've had nights where I've cried myself to sleep, like just seeing these images. It's so hard to see and to experience. So how do we talk about joy when we know that our people in our ummah are suffering this way? How do we experience joy? Even talking about it feels like wrong in some respects, right? But in order to allow ourselves to feel the joy, we're going to have to allow ourselves to actually feel the pain. So leaning into it. And a lot of times there's fear around leading into pain. So then there's avoidance, which is not healthy. We don't want to avoid, you want to take it, you want to allow yourself to be a witness, because we're witnesses to it, and we're going to be asked on the day of judgment, what did you see? How did you respond? So, it's the same thing, like allow yourself to feel the sadness. And I think that that's challenging for people. A lot of times when people even taste pain, there's that reaction of avoidance, or this is so hard, I'm going to numb, or this is so hard, I'm going to ignore it. I can't deal with it. But if we ignore and numb, we're not gonna be able to really experience happiness in joy the way
If
we
I may
want to.
have a follow-up for that, because I also met some people who are so in despair. So they do feel the pain so deeply that they can function. And perhaps that's why we also need to talk about joy, so we can find something that can sustain us, so we can't reach that point of despair. What do you think, or what do you advise?
No, I agree with you. Like you can't constantly be sitting in pain, or you're, like you said, you're completely dysfunctional. You're not able to really function or live your life if you're constantly sitting in despair. So it's about creating healthy spaces and really allotting time and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to allow myself to feel my feelings right now. And then I'm going to, you know, I'm going to create time and space for that, but then I'm going to maybe do something that's pleasurable for a little while. And we talk a little bit about the difference between pleasure and joy. To feel moments of pleasure, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like but it's not the same thing as joy. So knowing that pleasure as a coping mechanism in small doses could be healthy. Like I'm going to take a warm bubble bath and have a latte because that makes me feel, those are pleasurable experiences and they feel good. And that's an okay coping mechanism. It's just overindulgence in any kind of pleasure seeking activity becomes unhealthy. So kind of, or for example, when people turn to recreational drugs as a coping mechanism, that's an unhealthy coping mechanism. They're getting moments of pleasure, but then there's also all these other negative things that come along with using recreational drugs. As we know, that's an unhealthy coping mechanism. So the important thing here is when people are experiencing despair, we need to, give them positive coping mechanisms and give them permission to use those positive coping mechanisms, and to experience pleasure, because I think there's a distinction between joy and pleasure, but pleasure is not a bad thing. Allah created pleasurable things for us so we could experience comfort and goodness, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's, again, not done to excess.
I think also, sometimes we also don't make it okay to experience pain. There's the two extremes, right? There's numb and all of that, but sometimes, like I, for example, I grew up with a grandmother who is absolutely incredible, but she always would be like, "Why are you crying?" Or like if some man would cry, it'll be like, no, he shouldn't be crying, and kind of just like crying is a bad thing, right? Like pain and actually showing grief and pain is not necessarily considered strong or a virtue, right? And I wanted to, related to that, ask something, Amani. Like, I know we hear stories about the Prophet ﷺ, he and the pain that he experienced. Can you share a little bit about his pain and his suffering, but how did he deal with that pain and suffering? Um, because Manijeh, you said, going numb and putting it aside, those are some mechanisms that people use. But what were the mechanisms that Prophet ﷺ used when he was in pain?
Yeah, we know that the Prophet and the early Muslim community experienced a besiege similar to what Gaza, not to the extent of genocide, but we know that they experienced a besiege, and some of them were tortured and all of that. So I think the Prophet allowed himself again to feel the pain because he lost his uncle and his beloved wife Khadija as a result of the besiege. And he cried when he lost her. He continued to cheer whenever he remembered her or visited her grave. He cried. We know he also lost most of his children during his lifetime, except Fatima, radiallahu anha. So we know that he cried for the loss of his children whenever again they died or he visited the grave. So when people were surprised that the prophet, a man and the prophet cries, and asked him, even you, prophet of Allah, cries, and he said, this is from Allah's mercy. Tears are a release and an expression of deep love and pain, which is again an expression of the deep love he had for the people. So it's out of Allah's mercy, and as someone wise said, if you don't cry, your organs will cry. Like somehow that pain will still be expressed. So the Prophet allowed himself to cry. We know all the early Muslim who've been tortured or experienced loss, and they were expelled from their town, Mecca, and had to go to a new place. They were misplaced or displaced. They were displaced. So they experienced the same trauma, but of course, they found solace with the support of the people around them. But they did express the pain. The Prophet would look at the mountain of Mecca and say, by Allah, I love you, and I wouldn't have left if I was not forced to leave. So he expressed it verbally, he expressed it in his tears. So that is normal human behavior.
I think, one of the things that you're touching on too is that the human experience is such that there's ups and downs, there's moments of happiness, moments of immense pain, and but at the same time the prophet experienced joy as well, like the birth of his children or the victories that they experience for Islam. So there are, life is a roller coaster. It's just, I think sometimes we not sometimes, the reality is I don't think we always realize what we've signed up for. Being alive is just by default this roller coaster of experiences that we experience. And again, I think witnessing people suffer the way that we are right now, it's hard. It's really hard. So how do we allow ourselves to feel that joy? Well, going back to this idea that, yeah, you're allowed to feel joy. Allah's given us permission, where you have Allah's permission to feel joy, but at the same time, feel their pain as well. It's okay. That's actually us bearing witness, and it's important.
And
So
I think the joy comes from our faith. We see people killed, but we know those are martyrs.
yes,
We know that their spirits are alive, they are with Allah in a better place. And that faith helps us to, endure what is happening with the hope of in Allah's justice and compensation and reward. It's the people who are still living and grieving that suffer more. But in the small ways we could do to support them, when you post something or protest or donate, so you can feel the joy of feeling part of humanity, part of being a human being, and supporting those in pain. And another way to look at it is the people who are suffering because they lost their loved ones, they are grieving, they are misplaced, they lost their homes and children, they are amputated, all of that, have amputated limbs. I think part of it to know and to look at their example as an inspiration, and to know that their endurance it will be compensated by Allah, is compensated by Allah, is what is bringing them closer and in elevated status with Allah. And that gives us a little solace
Yeah.
that Allah will not let that go in vain.
Also, this idea that all these things are occurring at the same time. So, for example, like you said, you see these children that are losing their limbs and all these amputations, women having C-sections without epidurals, I mean, or painkillers, anesthesia. It's like there's pain there, right? They're physically experiencing pain. So we have our experience of pain just watching them go through this. So that's right here. But then at the same time, maybe your child's getting married, and so you're watching your child get married, and so you're happy, or you're getting married and you're joyful. But then you're also simultaneously holding the fact that there's people suffering in the world, or there's immense suffering in Gaza. So that these things are existing for us simultaneously. So we're allowed to feel this, but feel this also. And so that the human experience is that at any given time, you're going through a lot of different emotions, and that's okay.
So you can have mix of emotions at the same
Yeah.
time.
You're allowed to feel that you're not betraying yourself if you have a moment of joy. It's not self-betrayal. I'm not betraying myself if I experience joy. I'm not betraying the people of Gaza. I'm not doing anything wrong if I have all these emotions existing within me.
Even over there, like I seen the video of how a woman have brought these lanterns, Ramadan lanterns for the children in Gaza, because she wanted them to feel a little joy.
Yeah.
And I saw other videos too where people, some of the men who can play music or sing, bring the children, and so the adults come too for a moment of relief. So they have the mixed feeling at the same time.
Yes.
Well,
Um,
I think Sadaf,
yeah, something
we
happened.
will edit that, of course. So she
Yeah.
can.
What happened to her?
Sadaf,
Sorry, someone
is
was at the
she?
door. We will edit that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just wondering what happened to you.
Yeah. Okay. When I also wanted to add when my dad died, we were all it was the hardest thing that we all had to deal with. And I remember after the funeral, we were all sitting around in my uncle's living room in Pakistan, all of the kids and the whole family. And I don't know who it was. Somebody mentioned this memory that we have of my dad and how he would just like burp or fart and just like do these silly things. And we just started cracking up. Like, what, and then it just descended into all of these different stories that everybody had of Abu, just all the ways that he made everybody laugh and all the fun adventures we went on. And it really it was exactly what everybody needed in that moment because we were just so broken and we needed to just, you know, connect with him and just feel something, I think. So those moments are important. I think though that joy that we found really helped us get through that really, really difficult day. And I have a friend recently who same thing, like her dad had just died and her whole family was in town, had descended into town and she was talking about people were coming to see her mom and stuff, but all her cousins were sitting there and telling jokes and it was how they were coping and getting through that really difficult day, and someone from the outside can very easily sit there and judge people for, oh, look at them unfeeling, they're laughing after a death, but is that necessarily fair? Because that's something that they need. I think, and I know this from personal experience, that after loss and after you've suffered and all of this pain, sometimes you need that joy. Um, And
And
it's the
it's
only thing that'll get you
almost
through.
celebrating your father's life.
Yes.
So it's a mixed feeling, celebrating his life and honoring him,
Yeah.
as well feeling the pain of separation. As Manijeh said, they can be existing at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
also I
also
think
the
this idea
levity.
of this idea of like um we need, I think, our spirits in those moments, like we need that. I really think we need it. And there's whenever there was a birthday or an anniversary right after my dad died, we had to make these decisions. I remember just a month later, it was my sister's birthday. And it was like, should we have a party? Should we celebrate? Should we? There was just this not knowing how to proceed, right?
Yeah.
And we had to remind ourselves how he would want this. He would want us to have fun. He would want us to enjoy birthdays because he loved birthdays, right? So just this idea that we're doing him a disservice if we don't do these things that he loves and are not joyous, because that's how he lived his life. And we had to really remind ourselves that for that first year, everything that came, it felt weird,
Yeah.
you know? It felt weird to do it, but it felt weirder not to, because it was such a big thing that he loved.
But Salaf, to even get here, to even for you to get to this point, or for you all to collectively get there, it took self-compassion, right? To have compassion for yourself. Like, this is what I need right now. And my dad would want us to be happy. Like, that's self-love, self-compassion, right? And that's not always our go-to as human beings. We don't go to the place of, well, what do I need right now?
Yeah.
What's good for me? And what's good for me is actually okay. Like, as long as I'm not violating anybody's rights, you know, us doing this party is good for us. It's what we need right now.
Yeah.
Because if we are drained, we will not be able to serve anybody.
Yeah.
We would need someone to serve us. So it is finding coping mechanisms to strengthen ourselves so we can go back and be able to lift someone up and help someone in their difficulty.
And I think as women, that's our role a lot of times in life, right? Like when those really hard things are happening, we need to help our kids and or our younger siblings, or you're put in that position sometimes to help a parent if they lose a spouse. Like, and if we don't give ourselves that permission, and we are also very broken and in pain, not to say that we just ignore it, but sometimes you need to be the one who brings those different moments into that space.
And so essentially honoring yourself in the moment
Yes.
is really critical and important.
Exactly.
At every moment in life, really.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of today's conversation, the last thing I wanted to focus on was this idea of the deservability of joy, right? And I've known a lot of people, especially these last 5 months, that have had a really hard time being happy or doing fun things because they feel like, who am I to do this fun thing? Or who am I to be happy right now? Some of it comes from, I'm not the best person. Some of it comes from that guilt that you talked about in the beginning, survivor guilt, but just it's hard to be happy and feel deserving of that happiness sometimes. So, Manijeh, can you talk a little bit about um, how it's important for all of us and how we can make space for that? You talked about making space, but what are practices we can do to make space for that joy and deserving of it?
Sure. So, Sadaf, you touched on the fact that a lot of times it's guilt that's holding us back from feeling like we're deserving joy. I like to use the word worthy too. Like, are we worthy of this positive experience? I don't deserve to feel good. And so how do we move from feeling, um, like we don't deserve joy to feeling like we are worthy, or that we're giving ourselves permission to experience joy. And because so much of, being, when you're in the Islamic faith and being a Muslim, it's about your relationship with Allah or God. Ultimately, it's all about your connection to Allah. So when there's guilt, it's like, I'm a bad person. And how do we kind of move past that feeling of I'm bad, I don't deserve, or I'm not worthy? And one of the best tools to move out of that negative space of I'm not worthy and I don't deserve is astaghfar. So, reciting astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, I seek forgiveness from the accursed shaitan, I believe that's the exact translation. And one of you, Amani, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think essentially it's like I seek forgiveness when you say astaghfirullah. And so even though you're directly speaking to Allah and asking for forgiveness and you say it over and over and over again, like on a tasbih 100 times, maybe a couple of times a day or once a day or however many times you're able to really just like kind of do that meditative mindfulness practice of coming back to what you're saying, being intentional about what you're saying, and really then releasing the negative emotions that are there. Because a lack of worthiness, it's essentially a sense of lack. It's a negative space. It's I'm not worthy. I lack worthiness. I'm not good enough. So when you say astaghfirullah, you're essentially releasing those negative emotions. You're putting the trust that Allah has forgiven you. Because one thing is that once you say astaghfirullah, you're supposed to believe that Allah is forgiving you. So if Allah is forgiving you, then you forgive yourself. It's essentially us, when we don't think we're worthy, we're holding on to the idea that we're not good enough. And when we do astaghfar, we're releasing that negativity and we're believing that, okay, you know what, going back to that essential idea, which is I'm a good person. I deserve good things. And so worthiness or deservability of joy is rooted in the idea that I'm good. I deserve good things. I deserve good things to happen. And so you kind of, once that negativity kind of is gone or released, and here's the thing, it's daily practice, because on a daily basis, we encounter people lose our tempers. We're rough with our children. We cut someone off, driving. Somebody says something that ticks us off. Like there's so many experiences in our daily lives where we lose our cool, where we get ticked off, where we're sinning constantly, right? This idea that, sin is not even something that we do knowingly. Sometimes we're unknowingly sinning and we're not doing it intentionally. So then how do we release that burden? So I think that's the beauty of astaghfar. It's like releasing the burden that I'm carrying, that I'm not letting myself off the hook. How do I let myself off the hook? Well, if Allah has let me off the hook, then surely I can let myself off the hook. And so I feel like that's just one frame of looking at worthiness and deservability. How am I going to help make myself feel more like I deserve good things? And that's kind of the way I like to look at it.
There is also the meaning of forgiveness in Arabic language, غفران. It comes from the root verb غفر, to conceal something. So it's Allah conceals your guilt, maybe with an insight, or conceals your guilt with the sense of, yes, I forgive myself. I know why I behaved a certain way. Or he conceals your sense of helplessness and guilt of being surviving and while other people are dying. So he bestow upon you or conceal that sense with his own attributes, like he give you strength from his strength. He give you a sense of endurance from his endurance. He cover your sense of guilt maybe by inspiration of what to do. And he gives you a sense of faith and assurance that that is what is happening is not gonna pass without compensating the people who are hurt and without bringing someone to accountability, that he would see that they need to be brought to accountability. So it will restore your trust in Allah, and which helps you move on and be more productive rather than just having a sense of despair.
I want to say one thing that's kind of coming up for me as you're sharing that. I think we're talking about, forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, but then when we're then allowing ourselves to feel that joy, then we need to also be focusing on gratitude, right? So being grateful then for that blessing, whatever good that I'm going to now let in and allow myself to feel, I need to be grateful for that experience. And so kind of synced into, there's forgiveness and then there's gratitude. I'm worthy, but I'm grateful also for this amazing blessing and now that I've created space, now that I've opened up myself to experiencing joy because I've forgiven myself, or Allah has forgiven me and I've forgiven myself, I've now opened up the doors to deservability. So that means that now whatever joyful experience is coming my way, I'm there to receive it. I'm in a receiving space to let joy in. And so now once I'm receiving it, I'm also in gratitude.
And maybe joy is just being present with the blessings that is in the moment. Like when you think of the Prophet life, alayhi salatu wasalam, he lost again most of his family, his home, and he involved in wars for self-defense, and lost a lot of his friends and family members through that. So yes, he allowed himself with the pain, but you can see also he enjoyed when his grandchildren will ride on his back, and he was playful with them. He will carry his grandchild to the masjid. He will raise his wife Aisha radiallahu anha in the desert. Like he was not in that place of despair. He allowed all these feelings, welcomed them at the same time, and be present of what the moment demanded of him.
In order, one thing I want to say about that though is because you're talking directly about mindfulness, essentially being in the moment is you're mindful of your moment, and it's not convoluted by judgment. So when you're not judging the entirety of your life experience all the time, because a lot of times we're constantly assessing, am I good enough? Does my life look exactly how it should look right now? Am I meeting all my goals, and have I achieved all, are my kids achieving their milestones? Like, is everybody in my life exactly where they should be? Is my life meeting standards? When we're in such an assessing mode, it's very difficult to be mindful and present because you're so judgmental of yourself. You're constantly assessing and judging, assessing and judging. And a lot of times our minds work like that. That's an analytical mind, right? And I say this to people all the time. It's great to have an analytical mind. It's an asset. And when you're working at work and you're, doing analysis at work, that's great. That's an amazing skill set. But you have to be able to know when to turn that off. Because when you're at home in your life, living your day-to-day, if you're constantly in an analytical space, you're going to exhaust yourself. You're not going to be able to really enjoy your moments because they're going to be clouded by judgment, your own judgment and your own assessment of your progress in life and where you're at.
Oh my goodness, Manijeh, like I feel like you just described me completely. Like I am always in my thoughts, and I think I look at, and Amani knows this, like I feel like I'm a buzzkill, right? Because I'm literally always, even when I feel like even when I'm having fun, you can't necessarily always tell because I'm always just processing all of the stuff. Like that's my constant state is analysis. And it does make it hard to just let go and enjoy. I have a
But it
very
also
hard
makes
time.
you absolutely fantastic at what you do. And I challenge you to notice, just notice how that skill set serves you in terms of your role at MWO, but then that you want to have the ability to turn it off sometimes.
I do. I need to like dance. Like I don't dance. Everybody will dance and I'll just be sitting there because I can't. I'm always worried about like, what the heck? I can't do this. I'm gonna look weird. I'm gonna do this. I can't do that. Like it's always this internal weird language going on that's preventing me from having like just letting loose, right?
Yeah.
I think I need to just have moments where I totally just let loose. I think I do that with karaoke once in a while, where I will get on that stage. But even then, I stand there stiff and just like, I need to just like
You're an amazing singer. I love
I
listening to
appreciate
you
that. I appreciate
karaoke.
that. But I'm just saying, like, it is, I need to do more of it. I need to do more of the letting go of that self-judgment
Yeah.
just so that I can be in the moment and enjoy myself because I need the joy in my life. Otherwise, it is poison. Like I get sick when I don't process those things and I keep them inside and I'm not finding space to just unwind. And I remember my sister got me like a gift certificate for a manicure and pedicure once for my birthday. I never used it. I feel so bad. Oh gosh, she's gonna hear this. But I never used it. It expired because I felt so weird. Like I feel weird getting a manicure or pedicure. I was like, I don't know. It's a waste of my time. I have so many other things I need to be doing. But
Right.
I think I need to do those things too that just help me relax and take care of myself and just let go of the problems of the world.
Because I think also what we're not realizing is we're constantly looking at our life in a very um, cumulative way. Like we're looking at the span of our life. This is what I've achieved. These were my goals. This is where I'm at. We're constantly assessing. We're looking at the big picture. Whereas the only real thing right now is just this right now where we're at. This is the only thing that actually exists. The past is gone. The future hasn't happened yet. So this moment, how does this moment feel? And just really like allowing yourself to like feel this moment physically. Where are you at? Feel it. Feel your feet on the ground. What smells are you smelling? What are you hearing? What sounds are there? And so just grounding yourself and bringing yourself back into the moment and saying, oh, this is all there really is right now. And so if you treat each moment like that and just show up and be the best version of yourself. And I think that's the part that I'm pushing up against you a little bit, where I'm challenging you in what does the best version of yourself look like? Does that mean that Sadaf is constantly on, calculating, deducting, planning, or is being the best version of yourself just leaning into whatever you're feeling right now and really attending to that? Allowing the moment to just be. And that's hard. Like I'm telling you, but I have a bachelor's in computer science. You can even just imagine how analytical my mind is. So I struggle with that myself.
Yeah.
It's like we need to fill our cup, and that can be different from person to person. Some people just going to walk in nature, can be filling their cup. For someone else, it could be painting or doing something. So everyone has to find what can fill their cup. And of course, our own uh, spiritual path can fill our cup if we understand it and practice it with mindfulness. Again, being present with the invocation you're saying and making it a way or a tool to empower yourself and connect yourself to your core being and to Allah, so you can receive from Him something that can fill your cup, so you can come back and even be more stronger and able to deal with the challenges.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Mindfulness also, if you anchor it in believing in trusting Allah, then it all flows even better. Like, so for example, when you trust that Allah will take care of me, that the future is in Allah's hands, I'm not really in control, He's running the show. I'm just going to be excellent, do my best, whatever that is. Because my best is going to look like different in different situations. I'm my best for right now, my best might be my output is this much. Other times in my life, my output, my best might look like this. It's going to change. And fluctuate. So those gaps that are there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fill them. And I put my trust in him to give me, create positive outcomes. And then I trust that when the outcomes are not positive by my standards, when things aren't going well the way that I want them to, that's also his will, and that's okay, that it's all going to work out in the end. And then you can be mindful. Because if you're too worried about the outcomes, it's really difficult to be mindful.
It really is.
As a society, we're just really outcome oriented.
We are.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to cut this conversation short. Sadly,
Sure.
we are out of time, but we ended on this idea of personal growth and being in different places in our life. And I know when we were preparing, we talked a little bit about our nafs, our soul, self-love, just where we are and how to get to this, point of self-love, but how we have to kind of start in places where you're at your lowest sometimes, and you
Yeah.
slowly build up the skill sets that you need, the practices that you need, and growth. We all grow as human beings to get to this point of self-love, loving ourselves, and allowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love to come into our life. I think all of those things take time. So next time, we will be talking on Gem Stories again with our beloved Manijeh, and we'll talk about these things, the idea of the nafs, the levels of the nafs, and self-love. So thank you so much for joining us, Manijeh, and for everything that you shared. And Amani, you as well. I think there, so many ways of looking at joy and our spirits. And I think everything was so very helpful. And I cannot wait for our next conversation with you both. And make sure, everybody, if you're listening, please subscribe to the podcast, and you'll get notifications of our new episodes, inshallah, with Manijeh part 2 of this conversation about joy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Are we